Great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Cherise Trump. No relation to the current president-elect Donald Trump, although we probably do share opinions on free speech, I think. But thank you so much for hosting this annual event. This is actually, I think, really helpful, like you were saying, to get all of us in the same room, but also to create video services that we can actually send around to everyone who wants to learn more about these issues. So I think this is really valuable to the free speech movement for sure. I'm the executive director of Speech First. We are a nonprofit organization, a student membership organization, where we sue universities that violate the free speech rights of students and hold them accountable when they do so. We were founded in 2018 because of the fact that it was really apparent that the situation on campuses with regards to free speech was actually getting significantly worse over the years. And we were seeing universities start to use certain policies to target and censor constitutionally protected speech. And those policies that we sue universities on are things like bias response teams, which are these anonymous reporting systems where students are actually encouraged to report on one another for incidents of bias. And the universities often define bias as pretty much anything you can imagine: microaggressions, misgendering, being mean, offensive speech, mean jokes, stereotyping. Those are all terms that the universities use. I didn't just make those up. And that is basically what they are targeting and telling students to report on one another for. So, you're talking about calling back to historic events. Think of the Stasi in East Germany, where neighbors are being asked to report on neighbors anonymously. And the sad and scary part actually is that these reporting mechanisms are being used more than you would like to think. Students' first reactions now are to report something to figures of authority when they're even remotely offended, rather to engage with one another. And that in itself should tell us about the state of free speech on college campuses, and it should tell us where we need to start focusing our efforts. So we sue universities, public universities, on that issue specifically. We have a case right now pending cert before the Supreme Court against Indiana University for their bias response team. To paint a quick picture of the state of Indiana University's free speech situation, this is a campus that a year or two ago had a sign on their campus alerting students that if you or anyone that you know has been impacted by a free speech event, here are the 17 counseling services available to you on campus to help you get through that. So that's the campus that put that sign up. They are also incredibly, I heard something about bike racks earlier. This is actually interesting because schools clearly copy each other. The pro-life group notoriously on that campus is told that they have to put bicycle racks around their events in order for safety purposes, but really it prevents students from walking up to their tables and gaining information on the issue. So again, there's a lot of things going on that campus specifically, but their bias response team is one of the worst that we've ever seen. So that's why we sued them on behalf of our student members there. If SCOTUS takes up our case, it will be the first, and this is relevant to this meeting's topic, it will be the first free speech higher ed case before the Supreme Court since 2010. And I think we can all agree here that a lot has happened on campuses with regards to free speech in the last 15 years. So that's just something to point out. And I think most of the groups around this table have actually supported us in our endeavor by writing amicus briefs for our lawsuits. Another one, in addition to bias response teams, is the weaponization of harassment policies. Tyler kind of talked about this a little bit via Title IX, but it's important to recognize that universities actually have multiple harassment policies or anti-discrimination policies apart from Title VI and Title IX. And it's oftentimes because they believe that it has not gone far, that Title IX and Title VI have not gone far enough. So you'll see the weaponization of these to target constitutionally protected speech. We're suing Texas State University on this right now. We've won against University of Central Florida and the 11th Circuit on this issue, basically saying that anything can be considered harassing conduct that is offensive, mean, or intimidating. Again, very vague and broad phrasing for public schools, especially when it comes to their obligation to the Constitution and the First Amendment. So we're waiting for the Fifth Circuit to make a decision on that. We just argued against Texas State on that issue specifically. On both of these issues, we've won in major circuit courts, which is why I think that when we talk about positive reactions and kind of what we're seeing this year to be optimistic about, the courts are ready for these issues. We encourage everyone to bring the cases to them that are valid, and also the public is ready for this issue. I think we saw with the election that there's a mandate being by the American public against DEI. And this is something that when we talk about DEI officers are usually on these bias response teams on college campuses. They are usually leading the charge. They are the ones trying to target and censor speech most of the time on campuses. But it's important to also recognize that the bureaucracies on campuses are inordinately large. They are, there's campuses like Duke University where there's more administrators than students. That's not including faculty, that's just administrators. And so again, thinking about where the funding is going and when we're talking about DEI, I think is an important talking point. One more point on Title IX. Title IX, we actually are suing the Biden-Harris administration on this issue. There is a free speech angle here that's important, and I've touted this to Congress before and brought it up many times. There is an important, in the 2020 rule, there was an important free speech protection that was added. It's a Supreme Court precedent called the Davis Standard. Excuse me. And the Davis Standard is basically one of the best protections for free speech in Title IX, while also protecting students from harassing conduct. It basically says that in order for speech to be considered harassing conduct, it has to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it prevents students from having equal access to education. The Biden administration basically jettisoned that when they rewrote the rule, and they also added gender identity as a protected class. By doing those two things, what it does is it opens the doorway for universities basically having a federal mandate to do what they've already been doing, which is to target students who speak out against men participating in women's sports and other transgender issues, because now they can be reported to Title IX offices for having those conversations. So we have sued on and won in the 11th Circuit for a preliminary injunction to stop that rule. Obviously, we expect the new Department of Education coming in with the Trump administration to hopefully get us back to where we were on the 2020 rule with those important speech protections. One more thing I'll mention, I know I keep saying one more thing, but so we released a report earlier this spring on DEI. So the reason we did this report is because there's been a lot of really good efforts to defund DEI on campus, and I applaud those efforts, and I think they're really important. What needs to happen is you defund, turn off the spigot, and defund the administrations that are putting the bad policies in place. But we need to recognize that these policies have been in place for over a decade, and they have worked themselves into various aspects and areas within the culture on campus. So it's not just the DEI administration. So you say, okay, let's defund, no DEI officers, no DEI department. Okay, get rid of that, that's great. One, they'll repurpose into Title IX or Title VI offices, which we've already seen. And Texas did a good job kind of trying to stop that and saying, no, you actually just have to get rid of these staff. But they'll also, in the actual academic departments, in places like the medical schools and the law schools, there are separate DEI officers. There are separate DEI requirements that do not require DEI administrators in order to exist. So they're self-sustaining. And we put a report out on one issue in particular, looking at what kind of coercion is taking place at the curriculum level. And we found that 67% of the campuses, public and private across the country, are mandating students to take DEI full semester long courses in order to satisfy gen ed requirements. And this is just undergrad. So I can't even imagine what it is in other programs as well. And 59% of those were public schools. So there is a lot that states can do. We put a model policy out on this, basically saying, we call it the Freedom from Indoctrination Act. You can't mandate DEI or ideological courses in order for students to graduate. You could, we also suggest in that model policy that maybe how about mandate civics courses or constitutional studies courses in order to graduate. Students should be able to understand the basic inner workings of our government and legal system before they enter the public space, I think. But that's what the DEI report said. And Dr. Murphy, to your point on medical schools, we are actually, just a quick comment, sorry, on the microaggressions. When I ask students to define a microaggression, they oftentimes don't know because they're told that you will know it when you see it. So to create a policy or, what people are advocating for in some cases, a law around something that you can't even clearly define is already ridiculous enough on itself. But then some universities do define it as it can be anything from as simple as asking where someone is from or why they're majoring in a specific topic. And so when students don't know what could be considered, what could be reported, ultimately they just stop engaging, which is what Kay was talking about. They do not engage, they do not speak up in class. Faculty tell me all the time that they do not open their classroom up for discussion anymore towards the end. They just lecture and leave because they're afraid of being reported for creating an unsafe environment. On that same point, so it's important that students are made comfortable with engaging with opposing ideas. So we need more conservative faculty ultimately. A number of studies have shown that over 90%, I think it's over 95% of faculty currently are either vote for Democrats or contribute to Democratic campaigns. So we need more diversity in the faculty, and universities, maybe there could be a grant process that helps them prioritize viewpoint diversity in their hiring process. In addition to that, there's a number of these schools on that point that are popping up. I testified recently in Ohio because they're going to be opening a number of schools on their various campuses with regards to civics and constitutional studies and open discourse. And these schools or these institutes are kind of popping up everywhere, and they're going to create nice kind of homes essentially for either conservative faculty or faculty who respect free speech and constitutional policy or constitutional principles. Ultimately, though, there needs to be more of that, and we need to create the pipeline. So it's on conservative faculty, it's on people who want to play devil's advocate in the classroom and expose students to opposing viewpoints, have the conversations. It's up to them to stay in the academy, because a lot of them are the ones who are most outspoken are getting out or they're getting kicked out in various ways. So we just have to create avenues, create pipelines for them so that they can get tenure, so that they can be successful in their academic careers without being ostracized.
Yeah, there's I think it was